Hey folks, welcome back to Failure at Retirement. So today old Failure's kind of taking a page out of Steve's book at Steve's Retirement Corner, sitting on the porch outside the YouTube studio, just listening to the birds. Hopefully they don't bother you too much. So what I wanted to talk about today, a guy watches quite a few retirement videos now. This wasn't a thing a little over a year ago when a guy started his Failure at Retirement YouTube channel. I was mostly watching farming and I don't know, other stuff like that. But over time, I started watching more and more retirement channels. And now I have a lot of new subscribers. So I wanted to take a few minutes and go way back to when Failure was young, and try to explain why Failure has the mindset he has. I may double up on some stuff I've covered before. I apologize for that. It just is what it is. So, Failure, part of the deal I've known for years and years and years. I got a mind of my own. I've always followed my own path. And for the most part, that's kind of been the path less traveled, right? So, in fact, back in the 90s, I used to joke around with my friends at work when I was struggling to get going about how every time there was a fork in life's highway, I always took the wrong one, always took the wrong fork. And I would tell them the reason that happens is because men don't ask for directions. It's as simple as that. But honestly, now looking back, I'm glad that's the way it was. I'm glad I explored those paths. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. But believe you me, I explored them all. All right, so to the subject at hand. So I want to start by going way back when I was about 8 years old, 7, 8 years old, somewhere in there. My parents started a little side hustle business. And by little, I mean little. Like first year, I think they made $200-300. But the important thing is I was right there with them. Even as a little kid, I was there and I helped them grow that business. And even, like when I was in high school, it was kind of my priority, right, to get home from school and work on the farm. Um, and that business was growing. It was growing a lot in those years, exponentially, in fact. So, which, exponential on $200 isn't a lot, right? But, wait a few years, right? The important thing there is I saw what it took. I saw the hard work, the sacrifice, the blood, sweat, and tears, literally, that it takes for a guy to start his own business and actually grow it into something worthwhile. I saw it. I was there for it, right? And then when I was 9 years old, the folks got me a lamb to take to the county fair and show and sell at the auction. Well, that just hooked a guy right there, right? I saw I could do this and I could make money doing that, and I was 9 years old. So at 10 years old, I doubled down. I took two sheep to the fair. One sold at the auction, the other I just showed, and I got a ribbon with it. Well, from there on, like the next year, I had four sheep, and the next year, I had six sheep. And then I wasn't showing them all at that point, but I just kept getting more and more. By the time I was in high school, I was running 30 head of my own sheep. And, those sheep kept me pretty busy. Part of the reason I rushed home from school every day. But when I was 16, I bought my own pickup truck, and those sheep paid for most of it. I made payments on it for a couple of years. The sheep paid for most of it. I had a couple summer jobs that paid for the rest of it. But really, that was my first business, honestly. I frequently don't think that far back because I started another business a few years later. I'll talk about in a minute. But that really kind of showed a guy, how to work hard, how to invest your money a little bit in yourself, basically, and make some side money. So then, a guy's going to high school, and the folks' ranch just bordered the high school property. It was right there. And so some of the classrooms, you could see it. You could just look out the window, you could see it. And by the time I was a junior or senior in high school, I'm just thinking to myself, I have got to get out of this one horse town. And at that time, the town was probably like 1,500 people. And I'm thinking there has got to be bigger and better things out there in this world for me. And it ain't here. I got to get out of here. So when I was a senior, I applied and got accepted to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo State University. Pretty prestigious, known for agriculture, architecture, engineering, especially probably. In those days, it was either agriculture or architecture first, I believe. Um, anyway, a guy went there and got a degree in ag mechanics, and that took 5 years. And yeah, you ask why 5 years, not four. Well, the thing is the parents' business was growing so much. I spent most of the last year back on the farm working. In fact, it's just kind of a little amazing that I actually completed. The thing is, they're far enough apart. A guy don't do both at the same time, right? That commute's brutal, right? So about 5 6 hours brutal. But I would go to school for 3 months, and I'd come home and work for 3 months or 6 months. I'd go back to school for another 3 months. So that really stretched her out at the end, right? So what do I do now that I have my freshly minted degree? Do I run out into the big world I was looking for? No. I come right home and go right to work for the parents full time. Not a great career decision. I'm not really going to get into that. The Air Force boys having a little fun. So I'm not really going to get into that decision. In fact, I'm going to gloss over almost the whole thing um, in the interest of time, if nothing else. So I come home, I go to work for them, and this is like 88. And then Mrs. Failure and we are looking for a house to buy. Can't find one. It's just in the housing bubble right before the savings and loan crisis. Things are expensive. So one of the first accomplishments we had was in 1990. We built our own home. The folks had a corner of the ranch where it wouldn't grow anything, and so we made a deal. It was actually, the whole thing was kind of their idea. We made a deal, and I was working for them, obviously. And so I'm 25 years old. I built my own house right there. And I never built a house before at 25, believe it or not. But built the whole thing. Hired a few people, hired the drywall done, hired a couple guys to help me with the concrete, a couple guys to help here and there. A lot of friends just showed up. Source of my poor decision making showed up a lot. He was in high school at the time. Another kid that's still my friend today, he spent a lot of time there helping me. He was like a spider monkey putting the trusses up. He was all over that. Anyway, so that was a major accomplishment when we were fairly young. Got that house built, and it really, scheme of things, didn't cost that much. So then immediately after that, this is about 92, probably 91, 92. I started my next business. So I'm working for my dad, and he's all the time sourcing tractors, right? My dad bought a lot of tractors. I fixed them for him. Most of what I did working for my parents, honestly, was not farming. My dad did most of that, but he built almost all of his own stuff. And so I was the guy in the shop doing metal fabrication, building farm equipment, doing a lot of carpentry. those were the types of things I did the most, working for them, fixing tractors. So my dad had these tractors that they were a little too rough for him. He didn't buy them. He knew about them, and he kept talking about them for a month or two. Like, I don't know if I should. I don't know if I should. And finally, one day, I said, you know what? I think I'm going to buy them. Like, what can I buy them for? Oh, not much, a few $100s. So I went out one day and I bought, I think, 3 tractors for a grand total of about $500. And and then I quickly traded for a fourth tractor, and then pretty quick bought a couple others. And so here I am, in my late 20s, I guess, at this time. And I start this little tractor junkyard, basically. So there was no internet back in those days, but I figured out there was a couple of magazines specifically for John Deere collectors, John Deere 2-cylinder collectors. And I start tearing these tractors apart and UPSing them all over the United States and a little bit up into Canada. And literally, it was an interesting time. The phone would start ringing like 5 o'clock in the morning, and those guys wouldn't stop calling until 9, 10 o'clock at night. And I just got a notepad, no cell phones then, right? I just got a notepad by the phone in the house. And in fact, one of the things I did in that house when I built it, it seemed bougie at the time. I put a telephone in the master bath. And so lots of times, 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm standing in the master bath with my notepad, writing down the parts these guys want and the phone number so I can call them back. Anyway, that was an interesting time, but that taught me another lesson. The problem with that business, I did it for about 3 years or so, but it just became harder and harder and harder to source the tractors. It was kind of dialed in pretty specific because of what I originally found. They were John Deere 40s, if you're familiar with tractors. And then I had, I think, one 420 and a 430 later on. But here I was flipping tractors and selling the parts. I just recently found out, if you ever watched the Real Estate Ninja, one of his early businesses was doing the same thing. I found that fascinating. I never saw that one coming. So anyway, when was it? Fall of '94. I parted company with the parents on pretty unpleasant terms. Went to work for some other people out of town. Kind of a long story, but 30 days into it, turned out the owner of the company was, well, pretty schizophrenic, to put it nicely. So 30 days in, he fired me. So I kind of come home with my tail between my legs, and it's winter. The kind of work I do at that time, not a lot of work around. Well, the fool, like, the next day offered me another job, but offered me a job way up here, closer to home, close enough I could commute. And he wanted me to build a bunch of farm equipment, but for like half the money of what he was paying me for the first job. Well, as you can imagine, that didn't really set well with me. But a guy not having a lot of choices, um, after about another 30 days looking for work, I went ahead and took that job, started building bin carriers. So, what a bin carrier is, for those that aren't farmers, great. I'm going to pause here because the air compressor kicked on. All right, we're back. So, for the non farmers, if you don't know what a bin carrier is, it's a machine that you drive through the orchards, through the fruit orchards. The fruit is picked into 4 foot by 4 foot square wooden boxes that you move with the forklift. The bin carrier scatters the empty bins out in the orchard, and on the return trip, picks up a load of full ones. The ones we built, I believe, if I remember right, would haul 4 bins at a time, John Deere diesel powered. So they had bought one, and their fleet was just shot, and they were, pretty big pretty big farmers. I think like around 1,200 acres of fruit, if I remember right. So they wanted two more. And what I did was my task was to lead the crew of people they had existing, their mechanics, shop guys. So I took about 4 or 5 guys and myself, and in 60 days, we built 2 bin carriers. Not finished, but ready for paint, right? Well, right about then, just so happened that one of the companies I had applied for had got a hold of me and interviewed me and offered me a job. So this job they offered me was literally 25 cents an hour more and the promise of health insurance in the future, which I didn't have. It was originally offered by this company, but when they changed it up on me, they took it away. So this kind of became a theme for me there in the late 90s. I'd go to work for a company and do stuff, build a lot of things for them, make them a bunch of money, honestly. And then I didn't have any loyalty to them, right? Because they would fire me, I would quit. Like I just had absolutely no loyalty to these companies because they never demonstrated any to me. So 60 days in, 2 bin carriers, most of the way done, and I quit and I take this other job working in a different fruit plant. And during this time, I'm also becoming more and more equipment or more and more knowledgeable about food processing equipment and what it takes to do that, right? And I started building a little bit of that. So I think it was about 30 days later, uh, that company that I built the bin carriers for reached out to me again and said, "Hey, we need you back." And I said, "Why in the world would I do that? Like, you fired me once, I quit once, we're square. Let's just call it good." Well, they said, it's up to you. You write down what your job description is, what benefits you want, what your pay is, the whole works. You write it out how you want it, and we're just going to make it happen. It doesn't matter. We need you. So, okay, I think about it for a couple of days, and I basically write in there that I want to be in charge of everything mechanical they have. Every piece of equipment, every person who works on the equipment, that's on me. And I'm just going to take care of that for them. One thing I put in there, because the boss was schizophrenic, 3 months severance pay. That ended up working out. So 3 years later, me and the guys working there, we had built well in excess of $1 million worth of equipment for these fools. And things were just going great. I was working way too much because I was on salary because I was a fool. But things were going great. Owner shows up one day, fires me again. So anyway, I think I'm going to probably stop the video here. With like, I don't know what it was, second or third time at that point in my life I'd been fired and I'd already quit multiple jobs. I just didn't work for 1, 2, 3 companies like a lot of the other retired guys seem to have done. I worked for a bunch of them. So I'm going to stop here and pause, and next time I'll kind of pick up where we left off and talk a little bit more about how I ended up becoming self-employed and what that looked like. And I'm just trying to build up to something here, guys, for you to kind of understand my mindset, where I came from, how I got here, how I was able to retire at 50. Big picture, not like the other video I did on retiring at 50. Alrighty, I really appreciate you guys watching. I hope you stuck around to the end, even though it's probably just boring me jabbering. But we'll pick it up here again real soon, I promise. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Failure at Retirement.